Hello and welcome back to Forge Yourself Forward. I'm your host, Mike. Have you ever gotten to a point in your life where you feel that your prime is behind you, or that you already peaked and you're essentially going to be going downhill for the rest of your life? I know I did for quite a while, and this is a message of hope for anyone in maybe their late 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond. And I want you to know that no, you haven't reached your prime. It's not necessarily downhill unless you want it to be. So, the reason why I'm saying this message of hope is I want to give you an example of my own life, how I came to believe this about myself, and then it was my own actions that not only changed that belief for me, but reinforced that maybe the best part of me is still ahead and still yet to be built and cultivated. So, as way of background, I'm 37 years old, husband and father of two young boys. And in many ways, since I would say about 2019, 2020, I felt that my physical health and some of my ambition has really gone downhill rather rapidly. I gained a lot of weight and I kind of was just in a general, just going through the motions, going through life. And I felt that at that point, maybe I had already peaked and I was just going to be kind of coasting into the downhill that you see a lot of people unfortunately doing nowadays. And it was about 6 months ago that I really decided to make a real concerted effort to change myself, my, mannerisms, the way that I act, the way that I believe things, and try to see if I can maybe become the best version of me possible and what that would even look like. And last week I did a workout at my local gym that really opened my eyes as to how foolish I was being and that possibilities really are endless in a lot of ways. So, the workout in particular is a CrossFit workout. It's called 15.5. The workout itself is not overly important, as is what I found from it. So, I had done this workout once before in 2015 during the Open when I was part of a CrossFit gym my first time out. And I had a time of, I think it was like 12:42 or something like that. The time's not important. But at 30 years old, before I was married, before I had any children, I really had very little responsibilities. And that was what I thought was maybe the best version of me physically that I could be. But this past week, we did that workout again. This time, at 37, married, two kids, full-time career, I was 41 seconds faster than I was 7 years ago when I was 7 years younger. And it really got me thinking that there really is hope. I really can be a better version of myself now, or maybe the best version that I've ever been. And it's yet to even be built. And it got me thinking about a lot of people. Everyone's like, oh, yeah, those were the days, or, I used to be this, and I was a believer of that, just like most other people are. And I'm here to tell you that it's not true. You still can become the best version of you. And if you look at some examples in history, I really think that this solidifies the point even more so than what I'm saying to you right now. For instance, everybody alive today has probably heard of Samuel L. Jackson. He's probably one of the most famous actors of this generation. What a lot of people probably don't realize is Samuel L. Jackson did not start acting until he was 40 years old. And at 40, he had started his career that he really wanted. And now he's considered to be the highest grossing actor of all time. A lot of people don't know that, but that's the truth. Now, he probably could have in his mid or early 30s said, you know what, I've already peaked. Everybody's doing in their 20s. It's too late for me. But he didn't. He persevered. He kept going after his dream. And look at him now. Another example of this would be Colonel Sanders. Colonel Sanders' story is even more interesting in some ways, in that he didn't really get started selling chicken until he was 65 years old, after he had already retired from his job and he took what little he had left to sell his chicken door to door. The point I'm trying to make is that your attitude, the way that you view it, is really how you're going to determine whether or not you've peaked or not, whether or not the best years could be ahead of you or behind you, and whether or not the best version of you is yet to even be found, or you're just going to leave it behind. I know for me, I'm going to tell you some of the things that I did that got me to this point that really helped me reinforce that, I can become so much more than I am now, just like I think you can. So the first thing is small, consistent steps. More oftentimes than not, we get an idea in our heads. I know I have for many years, where we're going to make all these changes all at once. It can't be done. Listen, if you can do it, great. I can't. I don't know of anyone that can. What I do know is you start very, very small. Maybe it's a habit of going to the gym 3 times a week. Maybe it's a habit of reading a book, every day for 10 minutes. Whatever the habit is, you start small and you make sure that no matter what, you accomplish that. You owe it to yourself. And you do that day in, day out for weeks. Now, for me, what I did was I rejoined a CrossFit gym that I belong to now. And in doing that, I said, no matter what, I'm going to go to the gym at least 3 days a week, if I can 4 or 5. And I have been consistent with that since I joined at the end of September, beginning of October. We're in March now. So it took me a little over 5 months, 6 months to get really back to a level of fitness that I'm happy with. In that process, I've lost approximately 30 pounds. And I can tell you, it's not the big changes. It's the small, everyday, minute changes that make the big difference. It's, instead of eating a bacon, egg, and cheese, having maybe 3 hard-boiled eggs and some oatmeal. Yeah, a bacon, egg, and cheese is great. I love it. Trust me. I'm sure everybody else does. But having 3 hard-boiled eggs with some oatmeal is a lot healthier and fuels my body in a better way, just like I think it might do it for you. The second thing that I started to really get serious about is I measure everything. I measure my weight. I measure the amount of water that I drink. I measure the type of food that I have. When it comes to oatmeal, I make sure it's about 80 grams before I start to cook it. The reason I do that, and I know it sounds overly boring, is because what's measured can be tracked, and what's tracked can be changed. If you want to make a change, if you want to improve something, you have to measure it. You have to know where you're at. Otherwise, it's just a guessing game. And some days you're going to be feeling great, some days you're not, and you're not going to know why. But for instance, if I veer too far off my path one way or the other, like for instance, if I don't have my oatmeal, or I don't have my eggs, or I don't have, protein at dinner, I don't have a vegetable, I'm going to know. I'm going to start to feel those changes, and I'm going to look, and I'm going to say, well, you know what? I know I veered a little bit off here. I should change. Let me do this way. That has really helped me not only be consistent day in and day out, but it's kept me motivated. It's kept me going. It's kept me disciplined to keep making these changes. And then you start to build on them little by little by little by little, and it really makes it a big change. The third, and I would say arguably the most important part, and this is a part I'm a little bit embarrassed about, is you have to cut yourself some slack at times. I am incredibly hard on myself. I would often get really discouraged with myself and really down on myself if I didn't live up to certain expectations that I had for me. And I'm sure if you're listening to this, you're probably in the same boat. You expect the world from yourself, and when you don't necessarily fulfill that at that exact moment, sometimes the wheels can fall off. And you have to understand, as you're going to get older, things are going to change. Yeah, maybe you won't be the strongest version of you, but you might become the best version of you. So you have to kind of give yourself a little slack. Some of the things that you did in your 20s, you might not be able to do in your 30s or your 40s. And some of the things you do in your 40s, you're not going to be able to do in your 50s. And you have to also understand that becoming the best version of you involves change. It's understanding where you're at. That's why I like to measure everything, because I know, for instance, this will affect me this way, this will affect me this way. And as I get older and I see these changes, or if I get more muscle, I see these changes, or if I get more fat, I see these changes, I know what to do. But instead of beating myself up, I say, what can I do to serve me better? What can I do to improve myself? And it's when you start to do these things that I really think over time, you'll start to see these changes. The last thing I am going to leave you with is this. You are not, especially if you're starting to get older, like in your late 30s like me, getting into your 40s and beyond, you're not going to see these changes overnight. When I was in my 20s, I had done a weight loss challenge with my now wife where we did something called the Whole30. In about 45 days, I lost about 40 pounds. Can't exactly tell you why. I guess my diet was really bad, but that coupled with being in my 20s, I was just able to really rev everything up and lose a lot of weight really quick. Now in my 30s, I can't do that. Well, first of all, I don't even think that was necessarily healthy, losing that much weight that quickly, but that's another story. But understanding that I'm not going to drop the weight in the same way, or I'm not going to lift the weight in the same way, or I'm not going to read as many books in the same way, or I'm not going to write as many books in the same way, it doesn't matter. Understanding where you're at, giving yourself permission to be where you're at and to go even further. And that's what it's about, you forging yourself forward, step by step, hammer slam by hammer slam. Whatever it is, that's how you do it. It's one step at a time, one day at a time, one decision at a time. And when you realize that you really can become something great, you really can become the best version of you regardless of age, if you just give yourself that permission and you're willing to take that chance, I'm telling you, you will not let yourself down. The one thing that I took out of this after that workout was it felt like I saw a light at the end of the tunnel, that I really did have hope that I could be the best version of me. And I know it sounds so silly, but I'm telling you, you really can. Give it a try. You'll thank yourself in the future. And keep going forward.